I had allowed my disease to really rule my life. I had lived so in fear of an early death that I forgot to live. And so with that knowledge, I finally sought a transplant. And before then, I was afraid of the idea of transplant. Hi, I'm DELL, and I have cystic fibrosis and a double lung transplant, and I am recording from the beach. I was diagnosed about 3 months after birth when my doctors believed that I was actually being starved by my parents. They went as far as to call Child Protective Services on them, and thankfully I had a neighbor who babysat me, and she recognized my symptoms because her son also had cystic fibrosis. So at her urging, my parents had me tested for CF, and it turned out that who would have thought they were not actually starving me, and I was just not absorbing my food properly. So the first treatments that my doctors put me on were taking pancreatic enzymes. So after that I began to gain weight, but I didn't really have many lung troubles until I was maybe 6 or 7, and I started being hospitalized for Pseudomonas. If I was to describe my CF experience with just one word, it would probably be alienated. I always hated the idea of being different from all of my peers, and I'd even come up with these outrageous lies to explain why I wasn't at school for a couple weeks at a time. Like, this one time I told my friends that I was cast in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and so I had flown to London just to be cast into this film. Somehow my friends bought it, and I was very popular for a few weeks after that. I didn't really connect with anyone in the CF community until I was maybe in my college years. I was always afraid to see the worst case scenarios and think that that was inevitable for me. So for most of my life until my college years, it was just me. All my friends were normal, healthy, athletic, and talented, and I always felt like I was less than. And, you know, just growing up, going into your teen years and all the hormones raging and everything, it's easy to feel like really low self-esteem and kind of ashamed of the disease, and I didn't see any good in it. I went through the teenage rebellion stages, and I didn't want to take care of myself, and I was very angry and lashed out at my family. And eventually, kind of through the process of getting my transplant, my new priorities were having fun, loving other people, and taking care of myself. I don't think that I would have those priorities without cystic fibrosis. It taught me patience, it taught me compassion, it taught me to just enjoy every moment that I have, because I don't know how much longer I'm gonna have, and that's not a weakness for me anymore like it was before. Now it's something that empowers me. I do see my disease as something that has only made me stronger now. But yeah, growing up, I felt very alienated and very angry. I'm glad that I came out of that space. Like I mentioned, my transplant was kind of the turning point for me in the evolution of how I thought about my disease and how I thought about my life. But the trial by fire that led to that transplant was my treatment of Mycobacterium abscessus, which is a multi-drug resistant bacteria. And I've been treating it since about 2008 with up to 4 antibiotic cocktails at the same time, and they were very vicious drugs such as amikacin and tigecycline. And the IV amikacin ended up leading to me losing my hearing. I eventually became completely deaf. Shortly after I lost my hearing, I went through sepsis and septic shock, and I just literally went insane. I was punching people and screaming, and my doctors even had to strap me to my bed because of all the carbon dioxide that was going to my brain. I was just hallucinating and in a blind rage. About 4 days later, I finally returned to sanity, and I was broken and humbled, and I realized that my life was defined by anger up to that point. That my last words to my loved ones were angry and bitter. I had allowed my disease to really rule my life. I had lived so in fear of an early death that I forgot to live. And so with that knowledge, I finally sought a transplant, and before then I was afraid of the idea of transplant. Anytime someone would bring up the topic with me, I wouldn't want to hear it. I even told one doctor I never wanted to see him again because he brought up the topic of transplant with me. But with the realization that I lived my life incorrectly, I wanted a second chance at life, and the transplant did offer that avenue. So I moved from where I lived in Hawaii to seek a transplant at the University of California at San Francisco. Every other transplant center that my team had tried just rejected me up front because they said that me being deaf and having the Mycobacterium abscessus would make it very unlikely that I would even survive my transplant recovery. So thankfully the UCSF transplant team was willing to give me a chance. So they listed me for transplant, and I got the transplant in January 2017. Thankfully, I only had to wait for about 5 weeks, whereas they told me that it would probably be 5 to 9 months. So I was very lucky to have that short wait. The surgery pain was not as bad as I expected, honestly. When I woke up, I was very heavily drugged, and I was up and walking within 24 hours. And I had a very smooth recovery outside of like some painkiller addiction that I had afterwards, and just the mental struggle of getting the transplant was very heavy, but something that I was able to endure. And so ever since my transplant, I have devoted myself to just living as excitably as I can, to having so much fun and just traveling and loving people and eating all the great food and just doing everything I can to make sure that I'm living my life correctly this time. I was also given cochlear implants, which are computer chips in my brain that allow me to hear. I always like to say that UCSF kind of gave me the full makeover in giving me my hearing and my breathing back. This is the healthiest I can remember ever feeling. Despite hearing only the bad stories about transplant, my life is much, much better than I expected that it would be after transplant. And I've met many, many people who have also had lung transplants, and they're loving their lives too. I've even met people who got their transplant up to 28 years ago, and they're doing fine. Since my transplant, I have devoted myself to being as fit as possible. I work out regularly, I rock climb, and I bike and jog. And this past August, I went to Salt Lake City for the Transplant Games of America. And while there, I got medals in badminton, which is kind of a random sport, but really fun. And that was just a revolutionary moment for me. Because like I said, my entire childhood and teen years, I felt alienated. Every time I'd be in PE or just hanging out with a bunch of dudes, everybody would be working so hard at their sports, and I'd always be the guy on the sidelines or the guy who's playing and just like making a joke out of it because I didn't want people to see that I was seriously that bad at being active. And so to actually win a medal at the Transplant Games was just this awesome thing, to realize that I was on equal footing with other people, and that would not have been possible without my transplant or some revolutionary CF drug. I have a lot of advice for people with cystic fibrosis. I actually write a weekly column for Cystic Fibrosis News Today, and in it I give advice every week. But I think that the two biggest takeaways that I have is, one, like I said, I think that you should be living life, not being so afraid of your life ending that you forget to live it. Two, I would not make my mistake by treating transplant like it's the boogeyman. Instead, look into it and consider it long before you need it. Read about the good stories, the happy stories of people who went through their transplant, because really there's not much to be gained by reading only the negative stories. You should know that there are a lot of people with cystic fibrosis who have had transplants and are living very fulfilling, long lives. And a lot of people say that it's swapping one disease for another, but in my case at least, I would say that transplant life is maybe 1/10 of the burden that cystic fibrosis was. I just pop some pills a couple times a day and go on my way and, just have a fun time in life. Of course, there are, challenges, like you have to be careful with what kind of food you eat and your immune system is suppressed. But so far that hasn't been a big problem for me. And I'm not going to say that that's not a problem for other people. Other people do find transplant very hard. But the way I've been living my life lately, I feel like I didn't live until I had my transplant. That life has been beautiful and wonderful. And I think if you have even a small chance of obtaining what I have obtained, that's a risk worth taking. So I would say that, transplant is scary, it's intimidating, and it takes guts, but it's a gamble that can pay off greatly. I am eternally grateful to the CF community, these people who have become my sisters and brothers. It was definitely a mistake not to join the community earlier on. The power of empathy cannot be understated. I think that we are much mightier when we are united. to be able to talk to someone and know that they understand something that you have felt alienated about your entire life, that's something beautiful. If I were to travel back in time, I would of course take a lot better care of myself and be more positive, but I am content where I am. Cystic fibrosis forged me, and transplant added a vibrancy to my life. I am really thankful for these challenges because I don't think I would be half the person I am today if not for them. I'm breathing easily and I'm healthier than ever before, and I really couldn't ask for more. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want to connect, you can check out my blog or my column, but for now, I'm going to go and hit up the beach.
Through the Blooming Roses Project, cystic fibrosis warriors are able to share the ups and the downs and give advice from their experiences.
Good morning!
Hi, my name is Nick DeBreezy Jr.
Hi, I'm Abby Robinson.
My name is Angel Mamino Haynes.
My name is Melissa Papatragas, and I have cystic fibrosis.
What's going on?
Hi, I'm Brad Dell, and I have cystic fibrosis and a double lung transplant, and I am recording from the beach.
It says, "Hey girl, either I hyperventilate every time I see you, or I just have a crazy lung disease called cystic fibrosis."
If you have cystic fibrosis and you would like to have your story told, I would love to have you be a part of the Blooming Roses Project. You can email me at ashleysrosesofficial@gmail.com, and I can discuss with you further how we can get you on the next episode of this series.
And then what else do we have to say? Don't we have to say, don't forget to write below.